Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream and a breakdown of Operation Exploding Pager. That's the name I'm giving it. Our friend Amir Sarfati, I think, called it something like Operation Below the Belt. What I'm talking about is this massive, groundbreaking, unprecedented cyber attack that struck thousands of Hezbollah operatives today, Tuesday, September 17th, across Lebanon and also next door in Syria. Folks, where to begin? We woke up today to the news. At first, it was, hey, several dozen Hezbollah operatives. There was a mysterious explosion, series of explosions in the suburbs south of Beirut, which is a Hezbollah stronghold, and we don't know quite what happened. About an hour went by. It was hundreds of Hezbollah operatives, not just south of Beirut, but across Lebanon, felled by explosions. Some sort of device may have exploded. We didn't quite know. Time goes on. You discover that it's pagers. I'm talking like old school pagers. Hey, I grew up in Philly. We called them beepers. And a lot of people had them in the 1990s. And I didn't even know they were still around to a large extent. But Hezbollah had been using them as a form of wireless communication. And apparently they thought the pagers would be harder to detect and decipher their conversations, their plans, etc. Clearly, that wasn't the case. More on that in a minute. But we find out it's practically simultaneously exploding pagers. Then we find out it's thousands. As of last count, I'm coming to you around 4 p.m. Central Time here in Texas, 5 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. As of now, the confirmed number from the Lebanese Health Ministry, at least 2,800 wounded and at least 9 dead in this coordinated, unprecedented, stunning cyber attack today against Hezbollah that, folks, really seems like it's lifted right out of a Hollywood movie, a James Bond grand finale, but not a very happy ending. It's all too real for Hezbollah. Israel is not claiming responsibility, nor will it, I don't think, but I think it is pretty clear that this was a daring, just amazing Israeli intel operation. There's no word to describe. This is something we haven't seen before. And just to recap for you what exactly happened here, Hezbollah operatives, thousands of them, ladies and gentlemen, across Lebanon in particular, but also next door in Syria, in particular in and around Damascus, they were carrying pagers. Old school, like a beeper, we called it back in the day. And they're carrying pagers, and that was their means of communication. Now, these pagers apparently were relatively new. According to most reports out of the region, Hezbollah was using these particular pagers for only about 5 months. And it was a different brand than they had usually used in the past. Who supplied them with the pagers? We don't know, but their supply chain and the chain of command was certainly breached here, because the pagers that they acquired overheated and remotely somehow, not quite sure how this was done, lithium battery inside these pagers apparently. And here's the bottom line. It triggered an explosion in these pagers. Now, where do people put their pagers? Usually the pagers are in their pocket, on their belt. So I don't think you'll have a lot of little Hezbollahis running around anytime soon. As I said, our friend Amir called it Operation Below the Belt. So in all seriousness, look, these went off practically all at once, and explosions continued for about a 30-minute period, it seemed, and even longer than that. But mostly they kind of hit at once. And all of a sudden you have thousands of Hezbollah operatives. Folks, picture this. Thousands of Hezbollah operatives crumpling to the ground in agony, with blood around their waists, around their stomachs, their thighs, on their faces as well. Some of them were looking at the pagers. It literally blew up in their face. And there are reports out of Saudi media that at least 500 Hezbollah operatives lost eyes in this coordinated mass cyber attack today. Again, in the annals of intelligence and technology, at least in the 21st and 20th centuries, I don't think we've seen anything quite like this. When Israel said it had surprises up its sleeve vis-a-vis Hezbollah and Lebanon, it wasn't joking. So the explosions go off and the panic sets in. There were scenes of bedlam and chaos and absolute disarray on the streets of Beirut, in Damascus and Syria, people running around confused, frightened, Hezbollah operatives in heaps on the ground, hospitals filled, people being rushed to the hospitals in Lebanon and Syria. Again, as I come to 2,800 has been the number bandied about of those wounded, at least 200 of them critically wounded, and again, at least 9 dead. All of those totals are likely to increase, ladies and gentlemen, as the hours go on, and the dust settles. Right now, disarray in Lebanon and Hezbollah. Wow. We said about 2 weeks ago when we saw that massive preemptive strike by Israel that took out thousands of Hezbollah rocket launcher barrels and rocket launch sites as well, and really stunned Hezbollah and left it licking its wounds. We said, man, Hezbollah has been sent a message and suffered a heavy blow here. Today was another level. And 2 questions. Number one, does Israel take advantage of this? If Hezbollah's lines of communication have been not only breached, but harmed, in many cases, I don't know how they're communicating with each other right now. Every Hezbollah operative who has a pager right now is throwing it in the trash can, needless to say. They don't know how they were hacked, how they were breached, but they were. Massive embarrassment for Hezbollah and a blow when you have top operatives out of commission. Hey, folks, look, apparently Hezbollah leaders were affected by this. They had pagers as well. Unclear if Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the overall leader of Hezbollah, was affected, but some Hezbollah heavy hitters were indeed affected, including the son of a Hezbollah member of the Lebanese parliament who was killed, apparently. So, big question. Okay, you've got complete disarray. Hezbollah, which is known for its discipline over the years, it's not just a terror group, folks. It operates like a paramilitary unit, tens of thousands of well-trained and well-armed foot soldiers. Many of them received training in Iran. The discipline, all of it looks out the window right now. Chaos, disarray, chaotic scenes. Question number one, does Israel take advantage of this? We've been documenting here for weeks, in particular in the past week or so, Israel's intention to change the calculus in the north. Ground invasion, perhaps? Could this be the perfect time when Hezbollah is in complete disarray to move and press the advantage that you have? Number two, the second question, obviously, when, how will Hezbollah respond? Clearly, they have to respond. And again, folks, Israel has not claimed responsibility, but pretty clear that Israeli ingenuity and daring was behind this, and Hezbollah is already blaming Israel. Hezbollah has squarely pointed the finger at Israel and vowed revenge. How does Hezbollah respond? Does Iran get involved? Does this lead to a broader war? What comes next? We want to break it down. Hey, before we do, we're talking about the north. We're talking about the Israel-Lebanon border and what's happening there. Literally pagers blowing up today. And remember, the most profoundly impacted communities right now when it comes to this war, and it is a war. This has been over 11 months. October 7th anniversary, just under 3 weeks away. Hard to believe, 1 year since October 7th. But don't overlook that on October 8th, Hezbollah unilaterally began firing rockets, missiles, drones, and mortars at Israel. It has not stopped for nearly a year. On a near daily basis, Hezbollah is barraging northern Israel and even points deeper. Hezbollah, these projectiles have launched pretty deeply into the Galilee, even near Tiberias. So it's been unprecedented in many ways. And I don't use that term lightly, but here's the main problem there. We've got at least 60,000, some say close to 100,000 Israelis, residents of the beautiful communities of northern Israel, who have been evacuated from their homes. Folks, for the better part of a year, they have been literally living out of suitcases in hotels across Israel with no end date to this. They don't know when they're going home. This is, and then you have, of course, to the south, residents around southern Israel also evacuated, tens of thousands still. You can have a functioning, thriving economy and nation, especially when you're the size of the state of New Jersey, a tiny nation state, if you have entire regions of your nation shut down. What I'm saying to you is this: Israel could use a few good friends right now who believe in the biblical mandate laid out in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 3, to bless the people of Israel. That's where you and I come in, and that's where Magen David Adom comes in. They are the sponsor, our dear partner, Magen David Adom, the sponsor for today's live stream. It is SaveLivesIsrael.com, SaveLivesIsrael.com. Who is Magen David Adom? And for such a time as this, when we're talking about an imminent war in the north, who will respond? Magen David Adom is Israel's emergency services system. Folks, they respond to every terror attack. They respond to every heart attack, every car accident in Israel. They dispatch every ambulance in the nation. They receive thousands of emergency calls every day. They're a largely volunteer force, and yet they're responding to the call to the extent since October 7th, some 30 Magen David Adom volunteers have been killed in the line of duty for their country. 17 ambulances, Magen David Adom ambulances, destroyed. And folks, I can tell you, I'm in Israel on a frequent basis. Magen David Adom ambulances are everywhere. They were there. First on the scene on October 7th, first on the scene on October 8th. They have saved thousands of lives over the past year and for many years before the October 7th war broke out. They collect, they process, they distribute Israel's entire blood supply. And that's sadly going to come in very handy when this great northern war breaks out and a multi-front war where that Iranian ring of fire could ignite against Israel. They're quite literally doing God's work. Again, 90% of their EMTs, their paramedics, and first responders are volunteers, meaning they don't need to do this. They've got families, full-time jobs, and yet they're risking their lives quite literally to volunteer for the state of Israel and do God's work. It is SaveLivesIsrael.com. SaveLivesIsrael.com. I'm asked all the time, Erick, how do I help? How do I help Israel? How do I bless Israel? I can't get to Israel right now. What can I do? Look, Magen David Adom needs ambulances. They need bandages. They need medical supplies. They need blood. They need so much more. They're stretched thin in the north and the south. They need our help. Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you. And I am proud to stand with Magen David Adom. It's an organization I believe in very strongly. I don't partner with a bunch of organizations here, folks. When I do, there's a purpose and a mission to it. And they got to be doing God's work. And Magen David Adom certainly is. Check them out, SaveLivesIsrael.com. Okay, what comes next? After the pager attack heard around the world, after Operation Exploding Pager today, again, Israel's not going to claim responsibility, but looks like the genius of the Mossad and Israeli intelligence at work once again. And Hezbollah is absolutely reeling right now. Shock in Beirut and shock next door in Damascus, and by extension, shock in Tehran. Because look, the head of the snake, the puppet master, the Iranian regime, they're feeling this as well, right? Hezbollah is the crown jewel of Iran's ring of fire. And when Hezbollah's hurting, their daddy is hurting too in Tehran. And we're seeing that right now. The shock is also reverberating through the presidential palace in Iran. And Iran's still licking its wounds from the death of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas terror master, in Tehran under the regime's noses last month. So what do we have now? We know a few things here. Just to give you backdrop to this operation. Number one, this operation came just a few hours after Israel confirmed that they had broken up a plot by Hezbollah to assassinate a former top Israeli defense official. Now, we don't know who this was, who the target was, but Hezbollah had planned to assassinate an Israeli official, presumably on Israeli soil. That would have been, if it was successful, God forbid, massive red line. Even the fact that it was being planned is a massive red line. Could that have factored into the decision for Israel to activate Operation Exploding Pager today against Hezbollah? Number two, Israel yesterday announced as a stated, now official stated aim of this war, and it's a two-front war. Arguably, it's an active three-front war. We saw this weekend the Houthis in Yemen, as we documented here in the newscast, launch a ballistic missile at Israel. Thankfully, it was shot down, but the third front, the Houthis are increasingly active. By the way, we did an entire newscast about that on Sunday. And if you missed it, you can check it out right here on the channel, just in our archives. Go to newscast. It's right there. And of course, while you're there, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We posted twice over the weekend. We try to post most days, Monday through Friday, depending on the news cycle. So be sure to subscribe. Join us here as Watchmen and Women on the Wall for such a time as this. It's news, it's current events, it's breaking news from an unapologetically biblical perspective. And we're in a spiritual battle right now, folks. And if you're not bringing that context to what's happening, then you're missing the boat. We can report all day on what's going on in the natural, in the physical, but there is a massive spiritual battle raging right now. And really, Israel is at the center of it. The devil hates what God loves. And the nation of Israel, its mere existence, the mere continued existence of the Jewish people, makes the devil irate. And you got to see that, not only with the Israel situation, with what's going on in the United States or across the Western world, the madness that has descended where good is called evil, evil is called good. We're going to cut through that clutter and bring the truth as much as we can. So we'd love for you to be with us here every single day. And okay, with the backdrop, Israel says stated war goal, returning the evacuees to their homes in the north. How are you going to do that? It's virtually impossible to do that without some sort of major operation against Hezbollah. We've been saying over the past week, Israel, they had that daring, obviously, preemptive strike about 2 weeks ago. We've seen Israel up its strikes against Hezbollah positions across Lebanon. We've seen Israel take out dozens of Hezbollah commanders, and they may have been taking out some more of them today as well with their pagers. But I've been saying, look, is Israel softening the ground, so to speak, not only in Lebanon, but in Syria for a major offensive, for the coming great northern war? And now we see today the massive cyber attack. And is the goal here for Israel, a question to ask, just to send a message to Hezbollah with the cyber attack? Or is it to capitalize on this sudden advantage and move decisively against Hezbollah? That is the question. Because, look, you're not getting the evacuees home to the north unless the calculus changes completely in the north. Folks, who in their right mind would I pose this question? We've got a very active chat here, awesome viewership, highly educated viewership. The all-stars of YouTube, our Watchmen viewers, love you guys and gals, and you're so educated, and the chats are so engaging that you guys have every day. I want to ask you this question. I posed it before. I don't think the opinions change, but what do you guys think? We may have some new viewers today. Okay, you're an evacuee who lives in northern Israel, one of those beautiful communities like Kiryat Shimona or Metula. Are you returning home if Hezbollah is not either pushed back at least 18 miles beyond the Litani River, 18 miles from the Israel-Lebanon border, or alternatively, if Hezbollah is not crushed just decisively, which is the preferable alternative? I mean, are you returning home with the situation as it is? Who would return home in their right mind? I don't think I would, because I think I'd be very concerned that the beast is still lurking at the border and that they have every intent to carry out attacks many more times the magnitude of what Hamas did in the south back on October 7th. Hezbollah is a different beast, and I do mean beast, in their capabilities. And they've also dug tunnels into the north. Several of them were exposed a few years back. You've seen me inside one of those tunnels with the IDF, descending into what felt like the bowels of hell. So there is the intent. There's the constant drumbeat from Hezbollah that they're going to invade the Galilee. I say all that to say, if they're still perched on the border, who's returning home? I mean, let's get serious. And the Israeli government knows this, and they know they must act. Now, there's a few schools of thought here. Number one, they're going to wait until after the U.S. election because, the last thing the Biden-Harris administration wants to see is a major Middle East war before the election that could perhaps jeopardize their chances. And number two, okay, is Israel going to do this right after the election, but before the winter sets in? It gets chilly in northern Israel and southern Lebanon, and the terrain changes there. So there's a lot going on, a lot that Israel's been considering. The main thing is the relentless pressure from the Biden administration. We had the Biden administration's envoy for Lebanon, Amos Hochstein, in Israel just yesterday. And the message from the Biden administration is this: don't widen the war. Don't attack Hezbollah. Don't do it. Now, to the flip side, they don't have any alternative scenario or solution for that. They just want to cover their own behinds before the election. Israel, don't do anything to hurt our chances or to stir things up before the election. And God forbid Israel would do something that might entail the United States maybe getting involved, shooting down some projectiles like it did, thankfully, on April 13th, when Iran fired over 300 rockets and drones at Israel and missiles. So you've had the Biden administration literally tying Israel's hands when it comes to Lebanon. Look, I'm quite frankly shocked that Israel has not moved into Lebanon in a decisive way yet. And I attribute that to one reason and one reason only: the Biden administration relentlessly hounding Israel, saying, if you go in offensively, we won't help. But if you then react and attack after you're attacked already, then we'll help you. We'll help you out. And by help, I don't mean U.S. boots on the ground or U.S. fighter jets. I mean strictly U.S. missile defense, like, again, we saw on April 13th. That's it. There's a reason that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the Democrat candidates, and Joe Biden by extension, every time they're asked about Israel, they say, we support Israel's right to defend itself. Key word, to defend itself. Translation: we support Israel striking back after they've already been attacked in a defensive posture, but we don't support Israel going on the offensive and stirring things up and making things difficult for us back in Washington, D.C. Because remember, this administration doesn't want to be bothered with foreign policy crises and national security. They're in the business of fundamentally transforming America. They're much more concerned with transing your little kid than they are dealing with pressing national security matters. I give you America's southern border, which at least 10 million people have crossed over in the past 3.5 years alone since Joe Biden took office. So you see where the priorities lie, and you can see why Israel's such an annoyance. Pesky Israel dares to strike its enemies so that it can save Israeli lives. Pesky Israel dares to put Israeli interest first, as they should. And guess what? The United States, my country where I'm sitting right now, we should put American interest first. Britain should put British interest first, and so on. Every nation state should look out for its own citizens first. That's the way it's been throughout history, and that's pure common sense. But we live in times where common sense, as we've said many times, is not so common. So Israel has infuriated the Western world by daring not only to defend itself, but to seek to achieve victory. It's one thing to do what Israel did over the past several years, which was to contain Hamas, deter Hamas, but not seek ultimate victory against Hamas. That changed on October 7th, clearly. The world really starts to get its knickers in a twist when Israel goes on the offensive and says, hey, rather than wait to be attacked and have scores of our citizens killed, maybe we should strike first and not give the enemy the opportunity to kill Israelis. But again, the West doesn't like that very much. So they've been browbeating Israel. And I said at the top, look, shouldn't Israel press the advantage right now? Hezbollah's in disarray. And imagine the lack of trust among Hezbollah right now. Clearly, there were moles inside the organization working with Israel. There had to be. So everyone's looking over their shoulder, eyeing each other up right now because basically, look, Hezbollah is a gangster paramilitary organization at the end of the day. It's like the jihadi version of the Sopranos. And they're looking over their shoulders right now, and they're questioning, and they're in disarray. You'd love to see Israel press the advantage here and do what's inevitable anyway. It's a question not of if, but when. Israel is going to have to act decisively to defeat Hezbollah and to bring the residents of the North home. Seems like now would be a good time to do it, but is Israel waiting to be struck first? And I can't believe I'm saying that. But if the Biden administration is saying, you know, we are not going to support you if you strike first, then Bibi may be saying right now in these, which have been going on throughout the day, by the way, these cabinet deliberations in Israel, Bibi may be saying, okay, if the only way we're going to get U.S. and world support is to let them strike first or to wait like they did 2 weeks ago, Israel, wait till the rockets are being mounted and Hezbollah is ready to launch and then we attack, then that's what we'll do. He's saying that's the price of gaining international support. Waiting till the last possible minute to preempt what Hezbollah is about to do. And Israel's been delivering the message, look, a ground invasion is the only way. If our stated goal is to bring the residents home to the north, we can't accomplish that without a ground invasion. That is not exactly music to U.S. officials' ears, but diplomacy in this case ain't going to work. Newsflash. Hezbollah is not going to suddenly drop its arms and lay down its arms, change its spots. It's not going to happen. And I find it hard to believe that Hezbollah would back up 18 miles from the Israel-Lebanon border beyond the Litani River. And one reason I find that hard to believe is because Hezbollah members live in that 18-mile stretch extending from the Israel-Lebanon border to the Litani River. The houses there are littered with Hezbollah members. That's Hezbollah country. So they're going to evacuate their homes, I suppose. And I don't think it's happening. Hezbollah has set up a massive power base throughout southern Lebanon at Israel's doorstep. And they're not going anywhere unless they are pushed. Now, does today make that more of a possibility, perhaps? Today, the absolute disaster, there's no other way to describe this. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a disaster for Hezbollah on multiple levels. Number one, just physical military terms. Thousands of your operatives have been seriously wounded and many killed. Number two, massive intelligence breach. Number three, massive embarrassment. Your prestige is hit. Not only are you hit by these exploding pagers in a daring, just mind-boggling, mind-blowing operation, but you're hit, let's be frank, many in their manhood. These are jihadis who thump their chests, and this is a disaster on many levels for Hezbollah. Does that leave? Well, they're gnashing their teeth and awaiting revenge, but another school of thought might be, okay, maybe it'll make them more amenable to some sort of deal. Maybe they'll say, you know what, we can't beat you, and in the meantime, we're gonna always try to beat you and regroup, but in the meantime, we're gonna back up. I find that unlikely, because if Hezbollah does that, it's bad enough they were the victims today of this operation, but if they suddenly back up and throw in the towel for the time being, their prestige is shot. Because remember, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah has told the world, that until Israel pulls out of Gaza and there's a ceasefire in Gaza with our Hamas brothers, we're going to keep firing at Israel. We will not stop the jihad against Israel until the Gaza situation changes. So Nasrallah has committed himself continuously, time and time again, in a very public way, to continuing the fight against Israel until the situation in Gaza changes. Well, it hasn't changed, and there's still no ceasefire in Gaza. So Nasrallah, what can he do? He's got to hold up his end of the bargain. If he stops, then he looks very, very bad, like he's not a man of his word, and the jihadi world is watching. So he's really tied himself in knots in here and put Hezbollah, I'm very glad to say, in a horrible position. And there's thousands of wounded Hezbollah operatives in hospitals tonight, missing eyes, limbs, various digits, fingers, toes, everything else, who are probably cursing the name of Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah for committing them to this fight all over Gaza. But now he's all in, and I don't know that he can turn back. So I believe that Nasrallah once again has overplayed his hand. And again, the two questions, the two forks in the road before us, right? Does Israel press this advantage and attack now? Or does Israel wait for Hezbollah to plot its revenge and Israel preemptively strikes, and then we may be off to a very large conflict that could become a multi-front war rather quick. I discussed that tonight, by the way. If you love the newscast here on YouTube, you will love our nightly show on TV. Our broadcast program just launched in March. It's called Stakelbeck Tonight. We air every weeknight, Monday through Friday on TBN. And we're on at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time with a re-air every night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please tune in, folks, because tonight we interview one of the world's, I don't say this lightly, top experts on Iran's nuclear program, really on all things Iran, Hezbollah. Mark Dubowitz joins us. He just returned from Israel and high-level meetings with top Israeli officials. He's got a lot to say about what we saw today and about Iran's nuclear program and the real Russia collusion, Russia and Iran working together. You'll want to watch that tonight on TBN. Stakelbeck Tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with a re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I've got more to say as well, including a bunch of footage of what went down in Lebanon today. So let me see if I missed anything. I feverishly took some notes before coming on because there was a lot to unpack, and I think we did it for the most part. Wow, what a day. What a day, the way it began. And you see, wow, there's an explosion in Beirut and dozens of Hezbollah members affected. That raises your eyebrows. But by the time I'm coming to you, and look, I'm coming to you again. I'm closing out here around 4:35 Central Time in Texas. At this time, 2,800 Hezbollah operatives wounded. Who knows? It may be 5,000 by the time you watch this. But Hezbollah is reeling, and we are on the precipice in the world's most chaotic and volatile region, the Middle East. What happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. And just to close, I believe, folks, that there are profound prophetic implications to all of this. I really believe that prophetic floodgates were opened on October 7th. And Hamas and Hezbollah, I think, ultimately will go the way of all of Israel's past enemies. I mentioned Genesis 12:3 at the top. God says to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you. He also says to Abraham, I will curse those who curse you. And for all the Israel haters, I always like to pose this question. Pharaoh, Haman, the Philistines, the Assyrians, the Amalekites, the Nazis, the Ottomans, the list goes on and on. All of Israel's enemies are in the ash heap of history. They're dead and gone. Yet Israel, tiny Israel, not only continues to survive, but thrive. How? There's no rational explanation. The explanation is this. The rebirth of Israel in 1948 was an absolute miracle of God Almighty. And the book of Psalms is very clear. Check out Psalms 2. We talked about today on my show, Stakelbeck Tonight. God laughs. He sees the plots and the planning and the schemes from the likes of Hezbollah on their pagers, formerly, and he laughs. The God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. So be encouraged. Keep that in mind. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for joining us. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.